to Nikki's Scrapbooking Adventures. Today we have Melanie for Calling Creatives. Hey, Melanie.
Hi, Nikki. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Can you tell who I am?
I'm so old, I don't know. You even told me on Monday's call, and I'm like, I have no idea who that character is.
Well, I'm Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service, which is an anime movie. So if you haven't, go ahead and check it out. It is Halloween-esque because she's a witch. So it's a really cute film. I really like it. I thought it'd be fun for my family and I to dress up as the main characters in that film this year. So my son will be the cat and my husband will be the boy who falls for Kiki.
Oh, that's awesome. I will check it out. Kiki's Delivery Service, you said, right?
Yeah.
See, I'm even writing it down because my memory's so bad. If I don't, I won't remember. Well, I think you look adorable no matter what.
Aw, thanks.
I actually thought initially that you had cut your hair and dyed it. I was like, wow, I'm impressed.
No, I thought about it, but not worth it when it's like a couple days a month. During the month I get to dress up. So happy Halloween, everybody.
Do you guys do like a trunk or treat or any of those types of things, or you just do the traditional house to house or go to the mall?
Yeah, we've got a couple different events. So my friends and I did like a little Halloween get together outside. And then I'm hosting a game night for one of my favorite spooky games. And so I've decorated my basement, and then we'll go trick-or-treating, maybe go pick a pumpkin somewhere, just all the traditional stuff.
Well, you're doing October Daily as well, right? So that helps play into that, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. So I felt like this year went too fast and I needed to slow down and kind of actually enjoy the month. And so that's why I decided to do October Daily, because I gotta get in the mood for Halloween. Like, I'm still not in the mood and it's the end of October.
Isn't that amazing? Are you going to do December Daily as well, or are you just going to do the October Daily this year?
I'm probably going to do December Daily. I feel like it really helps me get festive because I actually go and seek out things that are theme related so I can document them.
Right. That's why I do December dailies, just to kind of keep me in the spirit, so to speak, because it's very easy to let the whole month go by and then boom, it's Christmas and it's over.
Yep. So it also helps that I have a son and I want him to experience all these things too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're continuing the conversation from Monday over on my channel. We're talking about untold stories.
Yep. And you had 5 categories. Can you list them so we can remember what they were?
Sure. So I call them 5-ish because one is difficult stories in general, but I've broken it into 2 types of categories. And I don't know that we talked about that second one now that I think about it. So the first one was big emotions, right? So things like where someone has passed away, or a wedding, or maybe it's a graduation, something where you are very emotionally invested in the story that you need to document. The other facet of it that I don't think we talked about, I mentioned it, but I don't think we talked about it, was complicated or multifaceted stories, or where your perspective has changed. So this is where perhaps you have to document a trip that you made with a friend and you're no longer friends. You had a falling out, you no longer are in contact with each other, and how do you document it, right? Because that person's no longer a part of your life. It doesn't feel authentic to go and document it. So that would be another category. And then we talked a little bit about secondhand stories. So these would be stories that impact you in some way, but perhaps you don't recall, or they were from a previous generation. And then, of course, there was the age-old photo issue problem, which is you have stories, but you have no photos, or you have stories with too many photos. And we all know that I have a photo issue problem. And the last part was I was challenging all to think about stories that you've never thought to tell, and to maybe think outside your normal style and go perhaps a bit more reflective, talk about relationships, things that are of importance to you, as opposed to event-driven stories.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that are untold, aren't there, in scrapbooking?
There is. And what I found interesting is the more I think about this, the more stories I come up with.
I hope you're keeping a list.
Well, and actually that's one of one of the points that I wanted to talk about today was, how do you keep track of these stories? Like, how do you know what stories you need to tell? When you're in the mood to scrapbook, they don't always align with ideas to scrapbook, right? So you've got this kind of juggling part. So I actually have like a traveler's notebook where I just did a brain dump, right? So what happens, especially when you start going down memory lane, is that memories trigger other memories as you think about things. And then the next thing you know, you have a list of 50 items and you're like, I think I just made this project bigger than I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I would suggest that you just start writing down different ideas. Perhaps we've triggered some ideas through our conversations. Start with that. And as you start thinking about those ideas, more will definitely come. And you'll be surprised at how many untold stories you have.
Yep, definitely. I used to keep a scrapbooking notebook. I ran out of room and just haven't redone it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I need to get back into doing that.
You can always do it on your phone as well. You could keep a digital list. What's nice about that is most of us carry our phone with us all the time, so it's always there. Just the simple notes that comes with your iPhone or whatever would work just great. Those of you that are a little more sophisticated and have like OneNote and stuff like that, you could definitely, branch out. But yeah, or just, like I said, I keep a little traveler's notebook on my desk, and when I kind of want to do this brain dump, I pull that out.
Let's talk about that first category that you had. What was that first one again? Remind me.
Yeah, so big emotions. So how do you document those big emotion events? Now, we talked about this in a recent conversation you had brought up, but the fact that you had started documenting your son's journey, and we had a few responders that were just like, I can't do it. Like, I'm not there. I'm not at that point. And I think in Monday's call, you had mentioned that you had gotten to a certain point and now you're kind of stalled. And I think the big takeaway from this is that's okay, right? You can give it time. Nobody says that you have to document it ever, to be honest. And it's really just what you feel compelled to do. And it's your decision when that's the right time to tell the story, if you wish to tell it.
Right. Yep, exactly. I've gotten to the point where my son's journey is starting to go downhill in my documenting, and I just don't even want to relive those memories right now. I mean, it's been 3 years, but at the same time, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You've got those things that you need to process, and maybe you need to go to counseling. Like, I probably should go to counseling, but I'm never going to. But scrapbooking is my way of kind of getting counseling, working through those emotions and that kind of thing. So I'm okay with pausing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that pause could be 10 years. It could be 15 years. And the point is, I guess what I really want to encourage people is to don't beat yourself up about something like that. It's okay. If you're not in that point, document what you feel you are comfortable documenting at this point in time, and the rest will come when it's the time for it to happen.
Yep.
Right. I think that's the other part that, in general, people make rules for themselves in the world of scrapbooking. And I'm going to let everybody in on a little secret. There's no police. There's no scrapbooking police. No one's going to come after you and say, you failed. You didn't document these stories. It's what is important to you that you feel you want to document for whatever that reason is. And it does help if you know why you scrapbook, right? So, and there are different reasons why people scrapbook. So for me, I am not doing it for a legacy. I don't have children. I have nephews and nieces and stuff. And I would hope that they would want to retain the stories that I tell of the greater family. But I don't expect that they're going to care about my trip to Hawaii, or, the fact that I don't know, did a Halloween party in 2023, like that's not important to them. And that's not why I scrapbook. I scrapbook for me because I like reliving the memories and I like having those stories documented. And I hope that as I get older and perhaps run into memory issues, that kind of thing, that the stories will help keep them fresh and alive for me. That's what I hope.
I agree. That's part of the reason why I do my scrapbooking too, is because my family has Alzheimer's in as a history, and my memory isn't very good already at 32, 31. I don't even know what age I am. And so it's just worth getting those, memories on pages that make me happy. And so
Yeah.
the difficult ones are kind of on the back burner.
Yeah. And to be honest, the biggest reason why I scrapbook is for the creative process. I just love doing it. And there is value in that in and of itself as a stress reliever, just for the enjoyment of it, that kind of thing. So as we go through these ideas and suggestions, please don't feel that you are, you need to do all of these things, right? They're just suggestions for those of you that are looking for some ideas and perhaps want to be challenged in a few different ways to tell some stories that maybe you've never thought about. Other strategy that I came up with under the big emotions, besides just giving it time, is if you know that it's going to be a big emotion event, so let's say a wedding, right? That you try and journal in the moment. And when I say journal in the moment, I'm not talking about, writing a published book or anything like that, but like just jot down a few notes or do some voice recordings. I've done that as well, where I can't believe this is happening. This is such a fabulous day, blah, 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 get the excitement and the emotions in the journaling, because I find it's harder to recall those after time has passed. And I've done this when I did a really big trip in 1998. I left for Australia for a year, and I was going to travel for the entire year. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to scrapbook at that time, and so I journaled in the moment. And I love reading the journaling now, because it's infused with that in the moment situation, right? Where, I've got me journaling on the plane, flying to New Zealand, and it was like the excitement of this big grand adventure that I would never have gotten if I waited until I actually scrapbooked the photos. So, if you can, just make some notes, jot some notes, quotes, that kind of thing. And then when it's time to do the actual scrapbooking, you have that ready.
Yeah, that's one thing I wish I kind of did a better job of, is quotes. My son is 2.5, and so he's got all the funny phrases right now. I really need to do a better job about writing those down.
Yeah. There was somebody, I can't remember who it was. There was somebody in the scrapbooking industry that actually kept a notebook just of quotes that their children said, and they used that as jumping off points for scrapbooking, because that in itself tells a story, great titles, that kind of thing. So, okay, so then the other part under the difficult stories, where the complicated, multifaceted perspective has changed, right? So how do you document stories when, for instance, that person that's in that story is no longer part of your life? So an example for me, I made a pretty big trip to Denver, Colorado in, I can't remember what year, 2004, I think it was. And I was dating a fellow at that time, and we had grand adventures. We went snowshoeing in the mountains in the middle of the winter. We went all over the place, did all sorts of things. It was a fabulous time, had a great time. Well, I didn't document it then. Well, we subsequently broke up. So how do you document a story when now you look at all those photos and then it's no longer true, right? The feelings and emotions that the photos bring up no longer align with your feelings and emotions today. So how do you document those types of stories? And do you?
I think it's up to you if you want to. If you feel like it's significant to be able to document, you can come at it from two perspectives, right? You can come at it as, oh, I was so in love with this guy, a post tense kind of thing, or you can just straight up tell the events as they happened. You
Yep.
can either have emotions or no emotions. It doesn't really matter. Do you even want to document it?
Yeah,
It's up to you.
exactly. And I think that comes back to the no rules, right? You don't have to document every single event in your life. Nobody says you have to. If you want to drop it, you can. In this case, I made the rule. Um, I made the rule for myself is I didn't have to include photos of him. So I had all these great photos of this beautiful scenery in the Rocky Mountains, pictures of me in my, snowsuit and snowshoes and that kind of stuff. And I just made note that he was there, but I didn't go into any of the relationship aspect of it. And I focused more on the trip itself and how it made me feel as opposed to the relationship. And it took me a long time to get to that point because in my mind, I kept associating that trip with something that no longer was. And so once I did that, it was easy to scrapbook. I had no problems.
Not gonna lie, it sounds like it was a rough breakup.
It was, I don't know. It was kind of interesting. Of course, now I'm looking at it with time, right? So it's not that it was not amicable, or I think it was just more disappointment. I think that was more my feelings associated with it. And it was at a specific point in my life where it was really important for me to be in a relationship and was hoping for something more out of it, and it didn't happen. So it was more disappointment than anything else, and it was reliving that disappointment that was the biggest issue. And so I just opted to not include photos of him, and I don't know why, because he's no longer part of my life. I never talked to him. I haven't talked to him, so it's okay. It is what it is. And so I guess that's the other part, is just tell what you want to tell, right? Tell what you want to tell, share what you want to share. But I'm sure there are other situations that are difficult. You've got family photos where there have been divorces or whatever, that kind of thing. And so what do you do? Well, I mean, it was that at that point in time, but I don't think you need to elaborate on it either. You can just make note of it and move on. And then the other thing is that you can try and document it from both perspectives. If you are at a certain point where you feel that it's necessary to document how you felt at that point in time, there's nothing that says you can't add an addendum to your journaling, something to the effect that, this was a really important part of my life, blah, 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 this happened. And, unfortunately, this is the situation. In this case, it was something negative. Maybe it turns around that it was something positive. I don't know. Usually we don't have a hard time scrapbooking the positive stuff, though. So it's usually the difficult, right?
Yep.
Okay. Secondhand stories. So this is the one where you don't have the information or necessarily the story itself. You weren't there to witness it, or you were and you don't remember. So I would highly encourage everybody, and I'm going to say that I'm guilty of not doing this, and I keep telling myself that I do need to do this, is talk to your family members and get those stories down. Even if you don't feel the need to document them right this moment, at least get those stories so that you have the option to tell them later if you so desire to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that was neat but also didn't work out was my sister's husband recorded my grandpa's war stories on video, and so he was there taking the video. It didn't work out because that video got corrupted, unfortunately.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, so I don't know any of my grandpa's war stories because he only wanted my sister's husband to hear those stories and document them for the family as a whole. So I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
I would recommend, asking those questions yourselves and getting the stories yourselves and not relying on somebody else to do it.
Right. Oh, wow. That's heartbreaking. I actually am very fortunate. My dad wrote a book. So I always tease my dad because I keep telling him he's a scrapbooker. And he's, oh no, I'm not creative that way. I'm not creative that way. But he actually wrote a book and has quite a bit of our family history in it, all of our photos. We all had to write a piece to go in the book too. but we all got a copy of it. So I do have a copy of this book. It's probably about, I don't want to say it's an inch and a half thick kind of thing. So it's a good size book. So I do have a lot of that information in there. I would love to translate it into scrapbook pages though, because of course I like the creative aspect of, you know, taking the photos and translating it. But then there's many stories that I want to know the answers to that aren't in the book, because of course it's what my dad felt was important to relay, but not necessarily doesn't answer everything that I have. So I'm hoping, I'm going to be going home in November. So I'm hoping that I, you know, actually sit down and ask some of those questions and get some answers. But then I also have to be prepared and have all those questions. So we'll see. We'll see how prepared I am. There is a service. I saw this on probably Facebook where there's a book that you can give to, you know, loved ones or whatever that asks a series of questions of them. I think it's a book, or they email the question and then they can reply and they bind it into a book or something like that. It would be interesting to get a hand on the questions, right? So like, what are great questions to ask your parents, which would be great if you know, our listeners could leave some suggestions below. Like if you could ask a question, or you know, of a loved one that has gone, has passed away, what would you want to know? Because I would love to have that list, because I would love to ask my parents. They're in their mid-70s, so you know, it's I hope that they will live for many years, but you never know at this point.
It's true. It sounds like you're taking a traveler's notebook with you on vacation to see your family.
Yeah, that, or I might just do like just notes in my phone or something. We'll see. We'll see what happens. The other thing with secondhand stories, of course, if you know of certain events, like you kind of alluded to this earlier in your situation, you know, ask aunts, uncles, cousins, you know, people that were there. If you are connected to people outside of the family, friends, that kind of stuff, you know, you can always ask for their input or what they remember from the situation. Obviously, if you go back in history, it's going to be harder to connect to people that know the answers. But this is actually even just a good tip if you're documenting a big occasion, especially something like, you know, let's say a family reunion or something like that, where you get input from everybody that you can then incorporate into your journaling to tell a more rounded story. And maybe even find little nuggets of truth that you never knew about your family, as an example.
You know, this conversation has kind of sparked some ideas. I really want to document how my grandpa and grandma got together. They were doing a double date and they swapped partners, which I think is really fun.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
so they
that's
married
cool.
each other's dates.
Wow, that's interesting. That is so cool. That is, yeah, that would be very interesting to document, and be fun to document.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the other thing we talked about on Monday is you mentioned you had photos, but you don't always know the story, or I mentioned, I can't remember, that you don't always have the story or don't know what the story is. So I guess the question is, how can you use those stories to tell, or how can you use those photos to tell stories? So in my mind, what I'm thinking of doing is I have a series of memories that I have as a child, and that I might just pull from those pictures as representations of that story. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the exact picture taken at that exact point in time. But for instance, one of the big family outings we did every year is we went camping. So I know that we have a few camping photos in there. I don't know where they were, but there's nothing that says I can't use those photos to represent the story of, you know, where we camped. And I probably would tell the story in a more broad sense, you know, about how we used to camp every year in general, as opposed to in 1991 we went to Long Lake. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of more of an overarching story of remembering going camping with the family and what that meant and what that looked like.
Hmm. Yeah, that's kind of what I was going towards too, is like if you've got general photos and you're just a cute kid, it's okay to just do a cute kid layout. You don't have to necessarily have to do a story, but if you have memories that you don't have photos of, those photos that you have that are pretty generic, you can totally use those as kind of a representation
Absolutely.
of the page.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also for those of us that don't have a ton of photos, don't be afraid to reuse photos.
Mhm.
So that's another aspect that you can throw in there, which leads us to the photo issue of no photos versus too much photos. So you mentioned that you do document quite often stories that have no photos, and that you've used products to help tell the story.
Mhm.
So like die cuts, paper, thematic paper, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I was telling Melanie that my brother and I were both late for our first day of senior year. I'm adopted, so we were in the same grade. And I don't have any photos of that. So I chose to use a school-based collection to help me tell a school story. So another thing you can do if you don't have photos from your wedding, use a wedding collection. You know, you probably have photos, but of the specific story you're telling, right? Use your
Right.
collections that are thematic to help you tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I have been doing, and I have a whole folder of these, is quite often in Facebook, pictures will pop up and it'll be like, do you remember? And then there'll be a photo of something. And so I will use those photos as well. Like I will save them on my camera roll and use other people's photos to tell my story. So again, it's that representation as opposed to necessarily being the exact photo.
I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook's memories because starting in September, I see my son almost daily. And so it's a very harsh reminder. But at the same time, like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, it was like, oh, I get to start college. You know, like those kind of memories. Um, and so there's a love-hate relationship with Facebook memories for sure.
Yeah, this was more not so much memories from my camera roll. These were like Facebook groups where people, again, because I'm old, it's like the 80s fan group or whatever, right? And so they'll post like pictures of games that were popular in the 80s, or like board games that were popular in the
Yeah.
80s, or that kind of stuff. So it's like, oh, I remember playing that game. So then I'll just save that photo so that I know that I want to tell a story about games that we played when we were kids, right? So that's kind of more, I think, where I was heading in. But definitely, just the prompts that come up can trigger memories and stories that you maybe haven't told.
I think I might be in that same group, even though I'm a 90s baby, because my grandparents were my parents for the first several years. So I had all the stuff from the 80s. Like, I know what a cassette is, you know, I've used a floppy disk in a computer. Like,
Yeah,
they were slow to move on with technology.
fair enough, fair enough. So you're an 80s wannabe.
No, I don't ever want to be the 80s.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Actually, speak. This is a complete side note. So, I think it was on Instagram, and someone had done a stitch, and there was this young fellow, young, like probably early 20s, I would guess, and he was like, "Okay, what's this game all about?" And it was Operation.
Oh,
Are you
yes.
familiar? Yes.
Mhm.
And he's like, I don't understand like what the big deal is about this game. Like why people have been telling him that like this is an anxiety inducing game. And so he started playing it, and then of course he got zapped, right? He's just like, what the heck is this game? I'm like, that was me. I couldn't play that game. I was so nervous. So anyways,
No,
um, but yeah, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to have those types of things pop up, and then it triggers. It does automatically trigger other memories. I think about games, and then it's like, oh, what other toys did I have as a child? And what toys did I want as a child but didn't get? Things like that. And so it really does trigger an influx of stories for sure.
I feel like so we have the Sling app, which is like real TV, and commercials do that for me. Like you don't watch commercials anymore, but because it's actually on TV, I see all these brat dolls and I'm like, man, when I was little, I remember begging every single infomercial that was there for that item because I thought it was so cool on the commercial.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. There's another story. The influence of infomercials.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next part is how do you break down too many photos? So how do you know what photos to print? How do you know what photos to include? So I think I do a pretty good job when I do get around to printing photos, of picking which ones I like and which ones I don't. And I kind of have a strategy. And this is probably why, to be honest, why I don't like doing it, because it takes me a while to do it, is I will take my own math of photos, and I literally will have a directory, and I'll just go don't like, you know what I mean? So I'll drag everything over that I like and leave everything I don't, kind of a first pass. And then I'll go and look and I'll sort them into like how I want to do the layouts. You know, oh, I need to do a layout about this, specifically like a trip, right? If you think about a trip, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And then it's like, okay, now weed them down eventually, you know, until you get a reasonable number of photos. Because let's be real, you know, a trip to Hawaii for 5 days, I probably took 1,500 photos. Well, I'm not going to scrapbook all 1,500, right? Like, I'm just not. So how do you handle that? So what have you done? Because you're working on a travel album right now.
Yeah, I finished my travel album. I guess I picked my favorite. So each page of my travel album pretty much was a different event. And so I picked my favorite. That's honestly all I do. And you'll notice on a lot of my scrapbook pages, I only have 1 or 2 photos because only 1 or 2 of the photos is my favorite.
Okay.
And that's just how I narrow it down. If there's just even a little bit wrong, like maybe my smile wasn't perfect, I won't use that photo.
Okay. So you have very set criteria as to what makes a good photo for your scrapbook, and you have no problems um culling,
Nope.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
it's so funny.
probably
Okay.
sorry,
I
go
have
ahead.
a hard time actually documenting more than 1 photo on my layout. I think it's hard to do.
Wow. I think I'm the opposite. I have too many photos. Um, Part of my problem is I love taking photos and experimenting with like angles and stuff like that. So it's like, but I like both of them. You know, I like it from this angle and I like it from that angle. So what do I do? So I have tried a few different strategies. One is like if I know how I'm going to lay it out. So if I use like a sketch and it's a sketch for 10 photos, then I know I have to limit it to 10 photos. Right. So that helps. Okay, this is my boundary. So I have to pick at least 10. Right. And then the other thing that I will do, especially for trips, is I do trips in a separate album because I take so many photos. So I'll have its own album. But then I always do a 2-page spread in my chronological to represent that happened. And so then quite often those other photos that I love that didn't make the cut on the first one will make it onto the 2-page spread in the digital book. And then the last strategy I use, if nothing else fails, I use pockets. And I just tuck in the extra photos. You know, that I feel like I can't live without.
That's so funny. It's interesting that you think so far in advance. You're thinking about the layout that you're going to do while you're printing photos. That's too much work. That's too
But
much
see,
work.
that's why. That's probably my problem, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like I have to invest all of this just to print the 10 photos that I need. And it's like I'm not there. I'm not in that frame of mind. So then I don't print, right? And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, now I got to print. So I think I need to just print.
Yep.
Like you said, you do the free prints at least for a little while and get back into that kind of groove, and then see how that goes. And then, you know, maybe I'll go back to what I was doing, because it worked for many years, printing on demand. But it just feels like in this time of life that I'm in, I'm just too busy with other stuff that I just don't have that mental capacity to also do this at the same time.
Yeah. So what I was telling Melanie on Monday is I use an app called FreePrints. And so you get 85 free prints a month. And if you use my code NIHUS, IHUS1, you get 5 additional free prints, and all you have to do is pay for shipping. So in your case, Melanie, where you're talking about how many photos you have, maybe that 85 limit is actually something good for you because you have to pick 85 of the best photos.
Right. Right. And it doesn't preclude me printing an extra one if I need one when I go to do the layout.
Mhm.
but at least I've already narrowed it down so that I don't have this, volume to look out for. So anyways, I think I'm going to try it. We'll see what happens. I'll stay tuned because I'm sure we'll have an update, or one of you guys will ask at some point in time, Melanie, how are you doing with your photo printing?
Hey, Melanie, how are you doing with your photo printing?
Exactly. Okay, so then the last category was stories you never thought to tell, and this was kind of switching how you tell your stories. So most of us are event-based. I'm definitely event-based. So is Nikki. So what about telling some reflective stories, relationships, that kind of stuff? And the only real strategy I have here that I've used is just doing a brain dump. I think we talked about that either today or on Monday's call, where I just write everything down in a notebook. Things that trigger, oh, that would be cool to talk about, or oh, that's important to me, or that person played an important role in my life. I'd like to document it. So yeah, that's kind of my strategy for that one. Just, think about it, reflect on it, and see where it leads you.
Yeah, I'm not a very good reflector. I really like my event-based storytelling, but there are times where you need to tell the emotion behind it because it doesn't seem as significant without that emotional
Yeah.
portion of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even if you don't want to do the reflective part, like talk about different relationships, you've got some complicated relationships, it sounds like, in your family because of your situation between, being adopted and with your grandparents and your aunt and uncle and all that kind of stuff, which have become your parents. I think that's right, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure there's a story around that whole transition and what that looked like and how you felt about it, and where you ended up, or maybe it's not important enough to you to document, and that's okay too. And that comes back to the point at the beginning, is just document what you feel is important, that you want to remember, or that you feel, will be important for someone else to know in the future.
Yeah. Documenting, I really just want to focus on the positive. And so in the beginning, that adoption was very negative. So I don't know that I'm ever going to want to document it, but it is a big part of my life. So who knows? Yeah. It might become part of my traveler notebook series where I talk about all of the emotions that I had during my adoption, so that part is in my legacy. I've documented it, but I haven't made a whole 12 by 12 page.
And that's a good point too, is, you only need to give it the amount of space that you feel comfortable giving it, right? And again, no rules. Whatever you want to do is all that matters, really.
Right. So next month, what are we doing, Melanie? Do you remember?
I want to say it's use it or lose it. Is that right?
I think you're right. And I'm totally doing that for October with my October daily. I'm using it or losing it this year because I want to use all of my October stuff so I can find you next year. This month, we're going to talk about using our stash or losing our stash, and what are some strategies, maybe doing some counterfeit kits, focusing on some stuff. Not 100% sure, but definitely stay tuned. Don't forget to check out Melanie's video on Monday where we talked about all of these topics again with Untold Stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.